Hey, thanks for joining in. This is Bitcoin Book Club on Hodlcast. Today, we are joined by Phil Champagne. Phil Champagne is the author of the Book of Satoshi, and today he joins the book club to discuss Satoshi, the writings, the book, and a little bit of his history and background. So I hope you enjoy and tune in for the next book.
Yeah, basic, simple technology. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Good, perfect.
Hi, Phil.
Yep.
We're just coming to the end of the book. It's a great book, so it's very it's funny. We're just saying how the questions that are asked today with regards Bitcoin, like it's nearly the same questions being asked, since the start. So
yeah, a lot of people are surprised by that how all the same kind of conversation many have were asked in the very first week or two of the publication of the white paper.
Yeah. And are you still super involved in Bitcoin space now? Do you attend events, or are you more reserved?
Once in a while, I would say I'm still involved. In the sense that I keep track of things. I look at what is going on in terms of overall technology and the latest taproot changes and what that means and so on. But also I'm looking at what's going on also with the other altcoins and all that. I know that a lot of Bitcoin maximalists is just Bitcoin and all that, but I have a position similar to Eric Voorhees on that, in the sense that I think it's a perfect ground for experiment. And even I can see a side chain of Bitcoin eventually that could use proof of stake, for example. So you'll go on that side chain, that runs with smart contracts and all that. So your sats with a Lightning style contract on the Bitcoin will be tied up into that side chain that runs proof of stake for their computation of their smart contracts and all that. And you'll be for running those nodes in a decentralized manner. It'll be done, say, with proof of stake, and that will be then your sats are basically used for the proof of stake. That could be a possibility that could happen in the future. It's just in the concept, we have to remember that it was not even considered possible what Bitcoin is doing back in the early 2000s. It's like the double spending, and how can you have a decentralized matter? And now suddenly the blockchain has demonstrated it's possible with proof of work and all that. So it's not completely crazy to imagine that we could have much more, and thanks to all these development of altcoin stuff, things that can be rolled into Bitcoin to exploit even more beneficial. Lightning Network, for example, is just something that Satoshi did not conceive at all in all his publication. No concept of that. And then it comes up with this thing, and folks like Poon came up with this, and it's just amazing. And so I think the future is bright because it's not static. It's really not static. And even Bitcoin as it is not static. Probably very conservative in terms of the main blockchain itself, but what's going to run over it or side to it, it's going to be exploding.
Yeah. And actually so we're talking about the escrow chapter. And I think what you're saying there really ties into that. What are your thoughts on how they're going to deal with escrow and how that's being dealt with now? And we were saying like that was kind of just talking about smart contracts. That was like on the tip of the tongue, but we were saying we don't think smart contracts existed prior to this conversation.
Escrow, I'm gonna have to.
No worries. So they were saying
multi-sig chapter.
With a third party, someone holding on to the money between two parties.
Yeah. You don't need a smart contract itself. I mean, it was possible the moment multi-sig came up. Then if you have a 2 out of 3 signature, Then an escrow agent can be the third party with the third signature, and you and I will have each of our private key. And if we're in a disagreement, no, I'm not going to pay you. And then you come up to the escrow and you show the proof. No, he does owe me that money. And so the agent signs with you, and I have nothing to say about it. So yeah, that was a simple concept, the very first kind of interesting concept that was built up.
It was a heated forum. I mean, it was heated. It seemed like people were a little concerned about whether people were arguing it's negating negative use of the blockchain over people trying to misuse it, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, it comes down to only a matter of two parties in this case, where they would use a third party. I mean, it's not fully decentralized in that aspect because you have a third party agent as an escrow and all that, but it was heading in that direction.
We were just, you mentioned Taproot, and we were just talking about private transactions, and we were kind of a little confused. We were trying to have this discussion on So the discussion was is it possible to make transactions and the amount, can we make that private and somehow still have the blockchain? And I thought they were the discussion of like having gold coins and not necessarily having the public ledger was an interesting concept, but it sounded like you need the history. You can't get rid of the history. It's just not possible.
Are you familiar with Monero?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar. Jack, can you give us a brief update on what Monero is, if you can?
Well, it's just a privacy coin that is much more private than Bitcoin. And to be honest, I'm not really sure how it works exactly. But I was kind of thinking that when we were talking about it, I was wondering, yes, Phil, what are your opinions on Monero? And
well, the Taproot will allow us to head into that direction a little bit more, in the sense that Zcash, for example, is another form as well as Monero. Zcash, most of their transactions are in the same form as Bitcoin, but you can also have them using a Schnorr signatures, which is something that Taproots will enable, and it will really allow for, I mean, for Bitcoin, for example, if you're really concerned about your being targeted, say you have 20 Bitcoins in a single address, and you want to make a purchase somewhere to a merchant or some guy. So of 0.1 Bitcoin. So 0.1 Bitcoin goes to that guy, and a 19.9 Bitcoin goes to your non-spending account, another Bitcoin address that you owe, plus change the fees, minus the fees, transaction fees. The guy will know, okay, this is my address, and obviously that's his change that goes to that. So I know he's got 19.9 Bitcoin, that guy. Wow. And I know where he lives, so I could go with a hammer and knock him up or whatever. So, you go with. So then the way is to, first of all, the Lightning Network, when you make transactions, are much more mass, because now it's strictly in the channels itself, and nobody else it's not the blockchain, so it's a little bit more mask those transactions, and so that will help. The fact that you have coin join, is that something you're familiar with? Coin join?
Yeah.
No. Okay. So that's again, these are tools that Bitcoin a lot of Bitcoin folks have created to try to emulate, bring up some private, non-transparency, basically remove some of the transparency that Bitcoin has on the transaction, by having a bunch of people putting into a specialized pool and then going out into a new address and so on. So basically, it's sort of a deniability or some sort, because now they don't know which ones, they know where your Bitcoin went into a bunch of addresses mixed up with all the others, and then it's basically a laundering machine, yeah, but for digital coins, and so that is going to be way more improved with the introduction of Taproot. The latest changes that have happened, because now you'll have way more multi-sig signature that is possible, and multiple factors and people involved. It's and because you'll have Schnorr signature as well. So I do not know the full extent of it, so it's something I'm still learning about, because I really want to see way more ability for Bitcoin to at least have the possibility on the side to make your transaction a little bit more private for security perspective. You know, if somebody comes to know how much you have, you don't want to, like Jameson Lopp, a guy I knew back in the days when I was in Raleigh, we were starting, in our Bitcoin meetup, he says, you can talk about Bitcoin, but you could, rule number one, you can talk about Bitcoin. Rule number two, you don't talk about your Bitcoin.
Yeah, he's a massive company now, Kaza. Do you know that?
Yes, yeah.
They're very successful. I think they raised a lot of money recently, but yeah, definitely. Did you have any questions around that? Because that was, you were specifically asking.
No, that was super helpful. And I hadn't even thought of, like, I know of Zcash and Monero, but I hadn't even thought of it in that context of sort of, because I know Zcash is on chain. And so it's really helpful to just think about it in that way. I'm also, I think, if I'm not wrong, that at least with Zcash, I just know more about this one than I don't really know about any others, but I think the person has the option of transparency. Like it's, they sort of operate where it's like the option is there, but you can turn it on and off. And that might be incorrect, so I apologize if it's misleading.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, Zcash.
I think that would be interesting, right? Like that would be a great solve for that.
Yeah, that's a distinction with Monero, where all transactions are completely masked and all that, but it's really a pain to use it. It's not user friendly. You know, that's the difference with Monero.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Just the CoinJoin. There's a great wallet, Wasabi wallet. That's the CoinJoin wallet. They're coming out with a new one in the next few weeks, and it's supposed to be like a big game changer for privacy.
Yeah, because of Taproot. Yeah, they're gonna hatch on the Taproot modification.
Yeah. Okay, Fabian, do you want to move it on there?
Yeah, so kind of just going through, talking about the Bitcoin, more Bitcoin mining and the difficulty. I thought that was interesting. I never thought about this, but it was the Bitcoin halving would be equivalent to doubling the difficulty. Now he says in terms of regarding profitability, but to me that was another mindset, but it makes sense, right? I mean, less Bitcoin is going to be out there.
Yeah, basically to get the same output of the same revenue, you need to double your hashing power. Since then you'll have twice as much block that you'll be able to mine, which will compensate for the halving. I think that's the general idea.
And what do you think is going to happen? Phil, I think this is actually a later chapter, but what do you think is going to happen once, say, 100 years from now, when there's nothing left to be mined?
2140? Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's quite of a debate on that, and some people that are saying that then it's only through transactions, and if we have layer 2 systems that are prevalent, then there's no use for Bitcoin itself, and then the miners will be starving. Well, I don't believe that, because I think it's really a free market system, and there will be an incentive and used for the actual transaction to happen on Bitcoin. Obviously, the economics of that will be different back in the future, because now it's strictly pay on transaction fees rather than, so how much transaction fees are right now compared to the block rewards, I do not know. I guess
But yeah, so I guess what you're saying, what is the average transaction, not the fees, but what are like the actual Bitcoin amount transactions? Do you know that? Because that I would assume that would be this, that would remain the same, right?
Yeah, but for the perspective, the discussion is more about the transaction fees, where the revenues of the miners are getting it from. Right now, it might be 90% from the block rewards and 10% from transaction fees. I don't know, I'm making that number up, while it'll be 100% in the future. So if things are the same as today in terms of number of transactions and the relative transaction fees, then in terms of Bitcoin, it'll be 100% from those transaction fees, but obviously Bitcoin will be way more expensive. So maybe in sats will be the same amount of transaction fees that will be costly, that in the future, the same cost in the future, but at a factor of 10 or 100 of the price that we have, or 1,000.
And those are also variable, right? Like you could opt to pay more in transaction fees.
Well, the transaction fees are very dynamic based on how much activity. So what you see as the average is suggested and all that will change depending on how much activity. So if in a month from now, there's suddenly a lot of transfers going on. So now if you really want to have it in the next block, then you're going to have to pay 3 or 4 times what you're paying right now. And that's what happened in 2017, when there was actually, some people are speculating that it was the Bitcoin Cash folks that were actually creating this extra transactions to push for Bitcoin Cash to, to justify Bitcoin Cash.
And Fabian, you're muted there.
Yeah.
They were trying, I don't want to say trying to force a narrative, but they were kind of trying to force a problem to like have the issue be brought up more. Is that kind of what you're saying?
This is conspiracy, so theory. So we don't know if really it's some people, some actors that pushed these transaction fees to be so high, or by generating so many transactions that the mempool was so large. So we don't know. So I'm going to need my lawyer before I keep talking.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I think it was like California was trying to put a limit on water usage. And so the golf courses were using more water than they needed to, so they could make their average water output higher. That's what that reminded me of,
Yeah. Well, it's just like the government divisions that needs to spend more, or at least what they have. Otherwise, you're going to be cut next year's. Oh, you don't need as much money, so we'll give you less.
Exactly. Spend as much as you can. Yeah.
Could I just ask a question there, Phil? Just around Bitcoin Cash, like what I suppose what I thought reading this book was quite interesting was now, I could be wrong on this, but I thought the big narrative around Bitcoin Cash back in the day was that Satoshi intended for Bitcoin to be used as a medium exchange, because and not so much a store of value, because he never mentioned the store of value aspect in the white paper. From reading this book, it kind of makes it seem like that's nonsense, because he clearly was big on Austrian economics and money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
So I watched you guys your part 1 of your show 2 days ago, and I picked up on a couple of things. So one of the things I want you to think about is how things changes with time and your perspective. And one of the best analogy I have is in World War II, in 1946, 1947. Okay, there's a point. Oh, hold on. 1947. Anyone talking about World War II was almost news back then. it's just so fresh. So some people were still recuperating. I mean, their wound was still fresh of the war and so on. I mean, it was crystal clear. It was still news for anyone. You jump 20 years later and it's history, and it's starting to be. And 40 years later, it's hardcore history, World War II history, And the perspective of how you see things when they're so fresh or in the beginning is different than later on. So that's the one thing where for my book, when I was at the Crypto Lina in Raleigh, August 2014, to push the book, I had the panel that says future history book for Bitcoin, because for the Book of Satoshi, because I understood that, okay, it was not really yet an history book, but in 10 or certainly in 20 years from now, it will be seen as an history book. Actually, its value will increase with time, strangely. It will be more interesting to read what he had to say even more in the future than it was in early on in 2014, 2010, when people just read those posts a week ago, So when that's in the same matter, when Satoshi was writing and creating those things, the value or Bitcoin was mostly about, like you mentioned in chapter 57, I think, it's like I'm not sure which chapter you are at right now, but he talked about, it's dull, compared it to a gray metal, boring gray metal. And that is, but with one specific, yes, you have it, yeah. One specific ability to be able to be sent across the internet. It's a metal that has no value other than being able to be sent across the internet. So from the perspective of him, he's like, okay, I'm creating this thing with a fixed supply and all that, and the beginning mine. But where its value is from is, well, as opposed to gold, you can send it over cheaply. So his mind was mostly focusing on its value coming from the fact that you can transact by sending it from one person to the other. He was not yet as thinking of a store of value, because it was more on the phase of promoting, the concept of, there's actually, this thing is useful. It's not just a dummy thing like many gold bugs are saying, or it's 21 million of nothing and all that. No, this value was coming from its utility, which was the ability to send money across the internet to somebody else across the world very cheaply, as opposed to gold, where you need to have boats or something like that. So I think that from that perspective, it's normal that it will be talking this way more than talking about a store value, because we were not there at that time in that mindset.
Okay, that's interesting. Good answer.
And kind of touching on that, on the economy of Bitcoin and money, how it would be circulated. I thought, looking at, it was historically, money was a commodity first, right? It was a commodity, and then it was used as consumption, commodity. What was the next one?
I don't remember.
Have to refresh my memory, but
yeah.
But I guess it was interesting, because the paradox was, it can't be used as money just from it being circulated as money, right? And then they were saying, well, no, you gotta. It helps to be. I guess here is going to help me run through. It helps to use it, and then use it as a bargaining tool, and then it's going to be used as a medium of exchange. But Bitcoin kind of skips that, in that it's not a.
Yeah. So Peter Schiff is one guy who actually believes you absolutely needs for something to become money, it has to be used for another purpose before, like gold, jewelry, and I don't know, a tooth, or pick a thing, But if you, I think the guy, Simon, the guy for Bitcoin Standard, the book, he did a good write-up on that. Really, it's not the purpose of something that becomes money does not need to be used for something else. If as long as it has all the attribute of making it easy for me money, it could be 100% just for that that material, that concept, purely 100% monetary purpose with no outside value out of it, and that's fine. But for Peter Schiff, that's where he barks at. It's funny because he's deviating from pure Austrian school of economics. They will say, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's as long as the markets see a value in something and can be used, and even if that happens to be 100% of its usage.
There was a very powerful quote in there where it was something along the lines of, it really just has to be the memory of what the price was. Like, it doesn't need to be tied to anything anymore. As long as people had the memory of what it was tied to, that it can continue. And then it was using that to talk about the dollar, how it was tied to gold. And then we just, now, even though the dollar is so heavily circulated, that now that it's separated from something actual physical, we still use it as value.
Yeah. Sort of typically, mostly because I think it's more, you're going into a discussion about the general mindset of a overall culture. And it was strongly based on physical gold coins and silver coins in the 1800s, and government is out of that, leave us alone, and that kind of thing. And suddenly, to move away from that, they had to go in a transition way. But today, the general population is so used to money being, or currencies being government run, that they could start from scratch. You pick all those people, you move them to another planet, and then you form a new government. And here's that paper currency is that nothing, based on nothing, but you have to pay your taxes on that. So the only utility for it is the IRS knocking on your door with a bunch of guns. So then you need to pay your taxes. The utility is to pay your taxes, basically. And that's no accident that the Central Bank Federal Reserve in the US was created the same year as the income tax was launched, 1913. They had to have the income tax as well to justify a use for it. They knew where it was going. But so the reason is, I'm saying is that, they have attached a utility to the dollar, even though it's fiat, and it's to pay their taxes. But it had to be a slow transition because the population was not in that kind of mindset. They used to 0% income tax and across the board. And so you don't change that right away. So that's the reason why that 1913 income tax was supposedly only for the ultra rich, and that's it. Now everybody's paying it.
So here's an interesting question, and I'm opening this up for everyone too, is, okay, so Saifuddin talks about how the devaluation of money led to a lot of fall in empires, right? He's talking about the Roman coin. It started with a D, but how they started clipping gold. But now that we're thinking about the idea of money as how even if it's disconnected from something, we still use it as such. Why did those other, now I feel like I'm asking the question again, which I'm sure Saifuddin answers, but so why did those empires fall? And that now, in terms of the money aspect, not for other
because
reasons.
it was using a coin. You mean a physical coin? Is that your question?
Yeah, they were using a physical coin, and they were diluting the coin, the value.
Yeah. The best example is the Roman Empire, and which actually is the reason why the barbaric invasion. It was so easy for them because the Roman army was not being paid because there were no money at all. So when you look at it, it's almost like hyperinflation, but it's on a slow motion for the Roman Empire. because the content of silver went from 95% in the coin to 1% or nothing, which is similar to what we got with the dollar so far. But so it's just that it's being done in a different way, and it's much more slower because there are coins, but it was the same principle. So, and the fact that it destroyed current completely their economy because of that,
and also the manipulation of it too, right? So the dilution of it, which is the
well, that was which was
yeah.
it. Yeah, because they went from 95% content to less than 1% in silver, and the rest was zinc, copper, or anything.
Yeah.
And just on that, Phil, what do you think in comparison to, like, what am I asking? How far along do you think we're going the same way Rome has gone? Hopefully not, but
that's a
Oh,
really
no.
good
the
question.
same things, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think it's just a matter of time that the dollar is done, toast, and they're gonna have to do, you're talking about a major change, when you look at what happened in the 70s, it's a sample of what we're gonna get. It was just a sample, very tiny, because it's going to be way more worse than that, and eventually it will be, completely a reset. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out, but it's the thing is with information and all that. I have a little bit more, and the fact that we have Bitcoin, I'll have it's the one benefit I see with Bitcoin is that it's educating the population massively. The one thing is people get interested about Bitcoin, many of people will start reading books about it and understanding the economics about it. How the heck this thing that is just on the internet can have value and all that. So they stop listening to crazy people like Paul Krugman, and they start reading other people. And now they understand what is way more basic economics from the Austrian school, and they understand now. So I think that's the major benefit with that perspective. We might, and the fact that Bitcoin is there, it will be rough, obviously, but it's not going to be a destroying for a long time. I mean, it's going to be much more contained, rapid, dense collapse, and people will wake up much faster. They'll know, oh, we have this thing, Bitcoin. So then they'll jump in. I mean, something that obviously the Roman didn't have the chance to use, and the 70s was not there either. And then the 70s is a little bit different because the economy was not that much electronics. Credit card were barely starting to be used and that kind of thing. But so people were still using paper money to buy stuff. So, but today with the electronics, it's only Bitcoin that will be able to displace the system. Gold and silver will only be a store of value in this case. So yes, I see a crash of currencies. I think it might be probably this decade, most likely. And out of this, there'll be light at the end of the tunnel.
And could you see, and what do you think of gold? Like, say if Bitcoin does eats the world, becomes the store of value, do gold and silver, do they play a part?
A good value for gold right now. If tomorrow the bond market realize that they're being paid 2% when the inflation rate is more like 15% right now, it's really more like 15%. And they realize, gosh, we're negative 13%. It doesn't make sense. So all that money is out of the bond market and goes into gold, silver, and Bitcoin. That's what I believe is going to happen. Not everything is going to move to Bitcoin, like people are saying. There's always different perspective in the world, and some will just go on, well, in case there's an EMP event or something like that, I need to diversify. I need to have some physical gold, silver, so that if I don't have any electricity, like there was in Puerto Rico with the hurricane, at least I have my coins. If the dollar is worth nothing, at least I have my physical coin. So there will always be those two. Obviously, Bitcoin being the most used, but I value that people see that it's more accurate for the price of gold, and put Bitcoin aside, it'll be more like $100,000 per ounce of gold right now, just to refloat the system. That's how distorted things are. At least 50,000 to 100,000. And Bitcoin, well, you can imagine somewhere between 1 million and 10 million.
Yeah, and I suppose if the dollar becomes worthless, that's infinite then, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and the thing is, when you're going to hyperinflation, the price of things get distorted across the board. And the price of asset, real estate, stocks, they go up, everything go up in the dollar, but they actually go down in gold, silver in history, and they'll go down certainly in Bitcoin as well. And the price of food, which will be the most, obviously the kind of commodity that people will be looking forward to the most, obviously, other than oxygen, which is free, will be food, obviously. And so that's why even in terms of food prices, you'll see the stock market going down. But gold, silver, and Bitcoin will go up even in price of food, because all that money is going to go into something that is safe and it can be transacted for food later on, or at least store of value. And in an economy where the real estate is not, and first of all, it's not transactable easily and you don't know, and you're not making any money because the rents are flat. And for the next month, people pay you for the full month, but by the end of the month, what they paid you is nothing, So when you have hyperinflation of 50% or more, landlords are suffering just as much, There was a story, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. There was a story of a guy in Chile in the late 70s. He went through hyperinflation, and his uncle was offered a 6-plex apartment in exchange for his Honda Civic, because the Honda Civic was more tradable than that 6-plex mobility is the most thing you will think about money, So our car is more closer to money than an apartment building. And so he was offered that, and he did not, and a big mistake, because obviously 2 or 3 years later, when they got out of that, the property really rise up, while the value of that on the plummet, because it was getting older and all that, and there was no longer a crisis anymore. A lot of people can make big money and that's the thing, the focus I'm going to go is like, we're going to have distortion crazy like this, and real estate will be devalued so much it will be actually a good thing to buy in some, not everywhere, obviously. There'll be very matter of location, but location will be critical, but real estate will be a bargain. So when things are replaced, then the economy can go back, and obviously we always need real estate, for restaurants and for a place to live.
Yep.
I need to fire soon. Bad joke. Okay. So we were in chapter 60. He starts talking about transaction space in the blockchain and how some of it should be free. A big issue was like, well, what happens if someone spends, the smallest amount of Satoshis on a transaction? And Satoshi said there should always be some free transaction space. And this just reminded me of some reoccurring things about Satoshi. He was always trying to make things kind of fair for people that don't even have a lot, whether it was transactions or some other things are escaping me. But Satoshi was always thinking, even when Bitcoin was worth nothing, he was always thinking about other people getting into it, other people having it, and other people utilizing it, and how to make it fair for people that don't have much. What do you guys think about that's kind of what that reminded me of. We can obviously talk about the transaction space that he had there, but
I just need to go back and look at it there.
no worries.
Well, just what he says about the cap, is it the captcha? I think that's interesting, because I think Twitter were only, well, they mentioned recently doing something like that with it was kind of like tying a bit of through their Lightning integration, they could stop spammers and bots by requiring people to hold a few Satoshis or something, so that it would make spamming unfeasible.
Right.
Yeah.
And with other sources, not Zcash, but that was a lot of, I think that was a lot of what crypto or cypherpunks were doing back in the day, right? Was trying to think of ways of like sending email, avoiding spam was a big thing, right? And then there was the reverse, if I could remember, was like, well, the spammers could make bots to get money or something flipped like that. I don't remember quite, but yeah, using it as captcha.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut your train of thought there, Jack. It's just kind of rambling there.
No, that was kind of it anyway. But it's interesting that, I don't know, it's only really being looked at now.
Yeah.
Like even actually, I think on the multi-sig chapter, I just looked it up there, and when they were talking about multi-sig, as far as I'm aware, and Phil, you might know a bit about this, but as far as I'm aware, there wasn't actually a multi-sig wallet developed for 3 years after that conversation. I think BitGo was the first wallet, according to Google here anyway.
Yeah, I don't remember the whole timing, but yeah, I mean, the concept was possible, but they might not have seen the news at that time. In the beginning, it was not possible yet, or I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I don't know when.
It's just interesting how, like, when the ideas were clearly all there, and it just took quite a while for the market to kind of proliferate them or something. And now, like, the rate of innovation in Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space just going, up and to the right, as they say. Yeah.
To come back to your point about Satoshi with the sum free, again, I don't know exactly when the concept of how much he thought about how things are, what would be state today, for example, because when you wrote those, he was basically on the moon discussing with people, and he was thinking about how things were at that time. Does he always, for every time he wrote things, was he always looking at every possibility in the future and how things will be? And obviously we know he didn't have the concept of a Lightning network in his mind. And so I'm not sure exactly how he would see things today.
But I feel like I did see 10 years a lot, like dispersed throughout the responses, always talking about decade increments, like 10 years, 15 years of things later on down the road. Maybe I'm just imagining that, but I feel like I always saw that or came across that whenever longer time.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what he did see is something where, as the bandwidth increases, I mean, just look at it. If back then the bandwidth was 100 times bigger, everybody's computer had at home 100 times more bandwidth than they had back then, than the whatever bandwidth it was in 2008. And this CPU, this space, multiplied by 100, everything. So that probably the block size, instead of making it at 1 megabyte, you might have make it at 2 or 3 or 4 megabyte as the start. It was based on what was at the time. And from that perspective, you might have think about, okay, which is going to be increasing it with the future. I mean, with the Bitcoin Cash proponents. But again, all of that he was thinking about a concept where the bandwidth and then disk storage will never be a problem in the future, eventually in the future, obviously. Second thing is concepts like the Lightning Network was not even in his imagination, as brilliant as it was. I mean, we're talking about something that was not even conceived back then.
Yeah.
The WikiLeaks, right? The Hornet's Nest. Phil, can you tell us where you were when this all happened? And what were your thoughts when you saw this being used, and you saw the core, like you saw WikiLeaks, Satoshi, I'm sure the forum, what was going on in the forums, and if you could, tell us about that.
First of all, I got in Bitcoin in 2012, so I wasn't there. Yeah, I'm not in the early beginning. I was not there when it was written. I read it posts, and that's one of the reasons for my motivation about the book. I came in 2012, and I noticed that this guy is gone for the last 2 years, and I wanted to learn more about the creator. And so I started writing the book. I started looking at the content of his posts, and I realized that, it's really interesting to read those things, but it's not easy to pick up those things across the board all over. So I saw, okay, I'm gonna write the book. That's how it led to that. But obviously, when I saw that, I found it interesting to see how my God, that's the last post before the next one where he says an announcement, and after that, the only thing happened is an email exchange between him and Gavin Anderson, and that's it.
You can get to, Hal Finney.
Do you know Hal Finney, Phil? Did you ever meet him?
No. And strangely, he was in Santa Barbara, but and I lived in Santa Barbara for a while, but obviously I was not in that space at all. So I wasn't just playing computer space, so networking. But I wish I met him.
Yeah.
I think Hal, throughout just everything that he's done, everyone loves him. He's like I don't know, just
yeah, I mean, it's simple. If Satoshi is Jesus, Hal Finney is like St. Peter, kind of, it's, it's like the best. That's the reason why I call it the Book of Satoshi, because there's so much a similarity with, on the technology from a religious perspective. The guy comes in 2 years public life, and then he's gone, and then all we have is his writing, and it's so much of religious analogy, but for nerds, for technology. And but obviously, if Hal Finney was still with us today, imagine the number of interviews it would be given, and it will be the best spokesperson as the promoter of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it was just interesting what you said there about I don't know, almost being biblical of the book or something, because I recommended this book to a friend recently, and he's reading it now, and he only started reading it yesterday, but he texted me and said, "Whoa, like, dude, this book's like the Bible or something for Bitcoin."
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's just interesting.
It's one of the Gospels, I think. Yeah, in the first book club we were talking about, it is Phil, that it is the Bitcoin Standard, Book of Satoshi, the Price of Tomorrow. It's always in that. These are the books you need to read to understand to understand Bitcoin and really to understand Satoshi. I'm at a loss for words right now with what to say, but
no, it's very good. You can really understand that Satoshi, like it's kind of goes to what you said a bit earlier about how people, like maybe, people hang on his every little word, and it kind of just seems like he's an ordinary guy that put together a lot of concepts to make something great, and that he's not this god figure that a lot of people portray him as on Twitter. And that really comes through in the book. Like really does.
Yeah, it's not something I was expecting, actually, that the fact that the more time goes, the more people hear about, okay, this thing was created, Bitcoin, by Satoshi, and he's no longer there, and then they only hear things here left and right about him and so on, or sometimes a capture of a little thing that he said somewhere, and people form an idea of an important figure of the past, and the more time goes by, the more importance that figure is, until I didn't expect that, but then they read the book and they read, oh gosh, that guy was just like an ordinary guy back then. It was like, but one thing that I see as brilliant, or was his perspective in the beginning or not, but by the fact that he vanished, he actually not only he decentralized Bitcoin even more, because he decentralized ownership. Now, as long as he was there, people could say, well, whatever Satoshi decided to do and the code, everybody's going to follow him, and everybody, it's going to be like the important figure, and therefore he's the one deciding everything, and so there's a centralized aspect to it. But the fact that he's not there anymore, decentralized ownership, and therefore it's really everybody's ownership now of Bitcoin. It reflects that, and I found that wonderful, just for that.
Yeah, it would be, people would be attacking his character and trying to find dirt, and the conversation would be about him.
That too.
Right?
Yes, character assassination would have been the next target by the Wall Street.
What's something that, because the book is what you've curated, right? You have gone through everything. So what is something that stands out in your mind as you were going through, maybe at the onset of looking at everything, the middle of your research, of writing, and then towards the end? How did, if anything, changed on his interactions with the protocol, him and the protocol?
It's a little bit hard. I mean, I would say it's mostly beginning. Obviously, it was strictly about theoretical discussion, while somewhere in the middle and the end, you had more about aspect of maintenance project, or maintenance aspect things, or the faucet, for example, where they created the Bitcoin faucet. Imagine that they were just distributing 5 Bitcoin free for anyone to.
I wish I knew about that.
Oh boy. And and obviously the very last post, that the one before the last one, where it talks about WikiLeaks. So there he's got a different twist, but the beginning and it's mostly about discussion, documentation, or theorizing about and teaching, or basically what he's his take about Bitcoin. So that's the evolution, but it's very subtle, I would say.
Okay.
So does anyone have any questions? I mean, I think we kind of just covered the book. I mean, besides, I guess, do we want to touch on Hal? I mean, the last post that he did, That was a tearjerker, right? Just everything that he did, talking about what he did to help. Did he now? Did he like help patch any holes in the protocol? Like, did he discover any holes and like try to? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah. There was one bug, an important bug that would have crashed the price of Bitcoin today if it was discovered today, where someone realized that he could send a transaction to himself and blow it up. It's like, even though he only has 0.1 Bitcoin, he's going to pretend he's got 10 Bitcoin. So he's sent something like that. I can't remember the exact thing, but it was one part of things that were not checked properly, or I can't remember what it was, but it was basically someone doing a transaction that was invalid. And so they patch it up. Obviously, they modified that and all that. So obviously, when I say a big crash, 50%, it's big. It will be horrible today. But yeah, this is the beginning. So and all those things that's the beauty of it. I mean, after 11 years, no, more than that, 13 years, everything has been scrutinized.
One thing I really I just really enjoyed hearing Hal and Satoshi. I found it very endearing. I felt that their partnership was really stable and they worked together to build things, and it just was nice to hear. And one of the things that Hal said, I think with the WikiLeaks portion of it, there was some quote, I don't want to misquote him, but he said something like, well, at least if Bitcoin's known as this, then we'll get our wiki page back. Or look, he said, he framed it in this positive light. I got this vibe from some of the writings from Hal that it sort of just bolstered the movement of their progress together. And it wasn't in it was just endearing to hear those things. But I guess I'm kind of curious in terms of, Phil, when you were putting this together, did you have to sift through a ton of writings and information to curate these, or did you know exactly what statements had to go in it and how the chapters would form? Did you have a really strong idea of that to begin with?
Yeah, that was the most difficult part of it, actually, is it was to try to make it the most chronological possible. But sometimes I've noticed that there were some subject later on in another thread that was similar to another one before. So I bring them up together in the same chapter so that people are not, move left and right while they're reading in a chronological order. So most of it is chronological. And per topic, I was trying to keep to, obviously everything that Satoshi wrote will be in the book and those conversation, but sometimes I had to put what the other person was putting so people understand, okay, what is he talking about? He's replying to somebody and I need the context, and so that's the reason why I chose to. And sometimes, that's the part where, okay, I need to see how much I'm going to include without overloading it, just enough to give an idea for people to understand what he's replying and what his concept is. Yeah, it was a good question.
Okay, Fabian, do you want to?
Yep.
What were you saying, Jack?
I think we have a slide, do we, with a few last questions? Just
I'll go ahead and pull that up.
We might have touched on some of them already, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few, just some tongue-in-cheek stuff. So tell us about the history of your introduction to Bitcoin, and I guess before Bitcoin. So it sounds like you're, into the cypherpunk. You were into cryptography. You were into cryptocurrencies. I don't want to cryptographic means of exchange. No, okay. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so I went to school in electrical engineering at my school, University of Sherbrooke in Quebec, half an hour from Vermont, north of the border in Vermont. And from there, I started working in Montreal as my first job in a company with about TCP/IP and basically networking. And from there, I ended up in a company in Santa Barbara. And it ended up, I switched to Cisco systems, and then I got a transfer to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2005. And then 2015, decided to come back to the Bay Area, so moved back. But so rewind a little bit. In 2001, around 2001, somebody offered me, suggested I read the Rich Dad Poor Dad, CPA I had. And that's where it's opened up my eyes to another side of things about investment and how basically real estate is really the key for basically retirement and riches. And basically one of the book I read was all the rich have 2 points in common: integrity, and either make money with real estate, they made their money with real estate, or they secured money with real estate. Because you've got the asset that you don't need to kill the chicken, you still have the eggs, And while with gold, silver, and even Bitcoin, if it's all you have is Bitcoin and you don't have anything and you want to retire, but you're gonna have to sell your Bitcoin to be able to, for your lifestyle. So from there, I started reading a little bit more, and eventually I come across related to gold and silver investment. And that's where I opened up the door around 2007 about Austrian school. Once you start reading in the direction of gold and silver, then you open the door about Austrian School of Economy. And it's like, wow, okay. Yeah, finally, the concept of economics that makes sense. They're not stretched. They're not a bunch of hocus pocus and smoke screen and mirrors. It's just plain simple when you look at it. And
did you have peers and friends to talk to about Austrian economics when you were getting into this?
No, it was a ton of books. And what was funny about that switch, it took a while after reading a bunch of books, pro books about gold and all that, to switch my mind and understand the reason why gold and silver at the time, there was only gold and silver, were a valuable investment to have in certain cycles. That is, it was not a good time to invest in gold and silver in the 80s and the 90s. Reason being, we were in a phase where interest rates were super high, above average, and they were going down. They moved the interest rates way above average in the early 80s to compensate because they were below average below the inflation, the real rates, basically. Now it's the opposite. They're completely below average, historical average across the whole planet. So it's just a powder keg, So now really the value in gold and silver, and that's where things were leading into 2007, basically. And 2008 with the crash and all that. I was reading all of that. And so my cousin told me about Bitcoin in 2012 and told me that. And it just, I was going out the door and I just a quick call and I had only 30 seconds a minute. And he said, do you know about Bitcoin? No. Oh, it's an internet money and something is like, what? I dismissed it. They're gonna print it as they want or whatever. It's a bunch of, it's like, yeah.
How did your cousin find out about it?
I don't know, but he's in the
Okay.
IT world, so you might have heard
Okay.
it,
All right,
from
all right.
perspective of. And I came across later on about from another YouTuber, and I started reading this, and oh my God, okay, I started to be, and then decided to look into it, and so that around 2012. I got in, and then eventually I started reading a little bit more, and then now it's like, oh, this thing's been fascinating, and that's where it led to reading about all this writing, and decided to write. And a friend of mine wrote a book in French about Bitcoin, and he was wondering, how did you know all about this, the Austrian school aspect of this? But for writing the book, there were barely any books about Bitcoin back then. Was coming from a gold silver perspective. It was just, as opposed to Peter Schiff, I was just opening my eyes to another paradigm. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that's very interesting too. Thanks. Did you ever come across Mike Maloney? Any of his stuff?
Yes, there's a photo of, if you go at bookofsatoshi.com, there's a media section or something. There's a tweet, I think I posted this, of me and Trace Mayer. We're at the Bitcoin conference in Washington, D.C. in April and May 2014. The book was fresh, freshly launched at that time.
Jack, can you elaborate on who he was or who he is?
Yeah, he just has it. Phil, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, goldsilver.com. He's a dealer in gold silver, and he's got a bunch of excellent series. And regardless of your take about if it's only Bitcoin and all that, these are historical aspect of things. And he wrote a series on YouTube videos, Hidden Secrets of Money, and it's 10 episodes, half an hour each. They're very good. He's sometimes on site in Egypt. He goes to Rome. He goes to Germany, and all those places where, key places where things really happen to in terms of economic events in the past. Weimar Germany, for Germany, in the case you understand. And so, yeah, it's very fascinating. And on that aspect, then a book I would recommend you guys read is The Creature from Jekyll Island. You'll have a different perspective on the economy, on the history of money. The Creature from Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island is an island off Georgia. That's where actually the Federal Reserve was concocted, designed by a bunch of basically Wall Street guys who try to figure out how those Americans really don't want any government interference, and are we going to spin a central banks without calling it the central bank, Federal Reserve, and how are we going to do it? Oh, we're going to have 12 banks, 12 regional banks across the United States. So it doesn't look like a central bank because with 12 banks, one for San Francisco, one for New York, and all that. Okay, it looks decentralized, but in reality, it's just smoke and mirror again. But the book goes through, basically, it goes actually all the way to the 14th century. A lot of history about things, even the Civil War, American Civil War, and an economic aspect to the Civil War that you might not be aware of.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I was talking about it with Fabian the other day. I'm reading it at the moment, so
you're reading The Creature from Jekyll? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
it's really long book.
I want to know what you can be your take. Yes, it's yeah. I've read it twice, and I want to read a third one.
I'm gonna be the bad guy here. I got like 2 chapters in, and I was like, man, this feels a little conspiratorial, right? It's got that feeling in there. And then I looked up the author, and I don't know much, but like my like skepticism alerts were going off, and like it was so it just felt conspiratorial, and then I kind of like put it down. But Jack is talking about it, you're talking about it. I gotta give it another shot. Where am I going wrong here, guys? Tell me where I'm
Well,
going wrong here.
First of all, just take, he's got full notes. He backed it up as much as possible. And one of the things he said in interviews, all of that, the braggings, that is why it's all known that it was fully conspiracy fact that they went on that island. Even they will brag about it today. But when they went there, they changed their names on the train. They want to make sure that the newspaper, again, like I mentioned before, it's always a matter of social perspective. A society, what is their perspective? Today, they are so conditioned to paper money, central banking authority, central authority. They have no problem. But you're talking about the late 1800s, early 1900s, and the Americans were way more wary of that kind of direction. And so that's why they were hiding all that. So it was a conspiracy, and really a conspiracy fact. And but he's backing it up. Later on, 20 years later, they were just bragging about how they managed to pull it off. And so that's how he managed to grab all. It's not going to be, published or PBS documentary about it, but they can't escape it. They have to brag about it, so it'll be here and there. And so he grabs those things.
Yeah. And actually, I was thinking of Rick Steves when you were saying he does these episodes and goes to different places. Rick Steves, yeah. I was like, and I love Rick Steves. He's like an uncle to me. He doesn't know it, but he is.
And Phil, do you think that from what they talk about the creature of Jekyll Island, how it's all kind of highly orchestrated and well thought out, their whole system, do you think that translates as much to today's world as it did back then?
Yeah, I think their goal is always been to, heavy control and it's power and secure power. And, in an environment where it's free market, you have to be able to always have a form of competition or maintain. You have a business that is very powerful, very good, or even a monopoly. In a free market, you need to have constant improvement to your business in your business structure. Otherwise, people will go to another one, and eventually it might be the next generation after you, or your grandson is not as good as you are, or whatever, eventually that company is going to be displaced and all that. When you're able to secure your place through a form of monopoly sanctioned by the government, like we have with central banking, because that's the origin of Federal Reserve, is actually partly private. It's actually more private than anything. And it's not in the government blue pages you're going to find the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It's going to be in the white pages, listed. It is a private bank, and they get portion of this interest rate. They create that money, those dollars, they lend it to the U.S. government. The U.S. government pays back interest on that loan, and most of it goes back to the government, to the federal government, but a portion of it goes to as a dividends to the owners of the banks on money they've never created and they never owned in the first place. So it's intergenerational wealth where they have nothing to worry about because it's established by, that's well maintained. Yeah, Jack, it is pretty terrible. On that side note, I can't wait to hear what you're gonna tell me about your reading of The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Well, I definitely do. I would maybe believe is the wrong word, but I can see that it could be real, a lot of the stuff in it. But the big thing about it is kind of there's it's a bit of a, like, say in today's world, a lot of the time, if you think of the Federal Reserve and the ECB, it's kind of, there's a portrayal that they're totally incompetent and that they don't know what they're doing, and there's an ignorance there. But there clearly isn't really an ignorance there if this is actually the case.
Well, there's multiple, it's an onion sort of things, and there's Or I would say, think of it like during World War II. The generals had the complete idea of the plan of the match, while the lieutenant has only a partial vision of how things were going, and they only need a need to know basis kind of thing. So those at the very top of those central banks, they understand exactly where things are going, and in terms of additional to that, you've got they are saying a bunch of things where, for example, with this Federal Reserve here in the US, it's similar to ECB, I'm sure, and UK. They are trying to navigate between scaring the population into what we might have, we might taper, we might reduce, oops, that means interest rate will go up, that means the stock market will go down maybe, or maybe the bond market will go up, everybody's going to be scared, there will be a deflationary collapse like 2008. So I'm a little bit nervous now I can't be putting all my dollars into Bitcoin and gold and silver, or, so it's artificially keeping people on check not to go overboard and dumping the dollar like crazy by having those careful verbiage. And sometimes you'll see one Federal Reserve chairman or president of a bank or national, they'll be talking one way, and then another one talking a different way, and then they'll be spitting out this and the Wall Street Journal, both of them the next day, talking about different things, doing different things, and you've got all that thing just to manipulate them. It's really about managing the perception of the people about what is going on, and then because they know that that's the key for how they can try to reduce inflation and reduce the dollar run away from the dollar in some way.
And just okay, so just to wrap up that point, so like we've already kind of said earlier that the dollar is coming to its end. There has to be a new plan after this. Is it? Yeah. So is it? There's two ways of going. One's Bitcoin, one's like central bank currency. Is that the next stage on? Or
I think if Bitcoin wasn't on around, what it would have done is gone through using what's going on with the COVID stuff, a combination of that to make restrictions on one end or take advantage of the restrictions, depending on how you take, and and using those digital currencies where they can manipulate everything. They can manipulate how much you're spending. They can do generate if there's a little bit too much deflation, sends you a check, free checks. Oh, you got instant money in your bank account because of just like they did that. So instead of sending you a check, suddenly you have more in your digital currency, a drop, a free drop kind of thing. Or on the other hand, if you're not behaving the way they like, or if you're really going against things that are bad, then they can just block it. Suddenly in your bank account, your ECB's, your digital currency is empty, or any kind of thing. You could have a dystopian, it could lead to a dystopian world that will be as horrible as you can think of with a digital currency. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin, because now it's totally parallel, completely detached. And now the more people are learning about it, and the fact that they know there's no control, it's for even anyone, it's like they know that at least there's no danger in there of seeing things that are going against their will.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Curious on your thoughts on, because you have the real estate background, and Michael Saylor is very well known for making a statement of Bitcoin being digital real estate. How do you see that?
Can you explain what he means by that? I'm not sure. Okay, I guess it's like you own a piece of the 21 million that exists, I guess, in that perspective.
Yeah, so if I can remember, it's analogous to the internet. It's like you own the internet, allows you to build anything on top of it, right? But no one owns the internet. Whereas Bitcoin, you can build and do many things on the Bitcoin network, and you own a piece of that network.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is it's actually, it comes back to gold and silver, and something for Peter Schiff to realize is gold, you could eventually, we could mine Bitcoin, we could mine gold on the moon or on Mars, on
In the
asteroids.
oceans, you can extract gold from
Or the ocean, yeah. And well, eventually we'll do everything we can on, and the technology. I mean, those open mine pits where we're digging gold 5 miles deep is not something the Roman could have done with their technology back then. But now we can. And 10, 20, 100 years from now, we might probably have the technology to send robots to the moon and dig gold and silver in an economic way, you know, possible to see that. And suddenly you'll see more supply of gold. And so you always have those things, but Bitcoin is 21 million no matter what. And so just like, for example, the island of England is fixed in terms of land, and there's no more land available outside of that. So you can look at it from a 21 million fixed supply as well. That's the size of the island, and that's it. There's nothing more outside of that. So if it's that perspective that he's talking about, that's more land than real estate in general, because the real estate, when you're talking about commercial real estate, for example, you own a property that you're leasing to somebody else and it generates revenue, and that's not what you have at Bitcoin. But if it's on the perspective of a land and the limited supply of a land, then I would see the analogy.
Okay.
Oh, I just had a really good question. Someone go ahead, ask a question. Oh, God damn it.
I have a question. It came up in my mind right before you suggested The Creature from Jekyll Island, but I was wondering if you had any other books, Austrian economics or Bitcoin, that you highly suggest that we read.
Yeah, so yeah, the Bitcoin Standard is a book I'm reading, and it's very good. It's very well done. I mean, most of the stuff is something I knew, but there are a couple of spin that he's putting on things that I realized, oh yeah, that's right. And I've learned a couple of things that are interesting as well. And I think for someone coming into, I mean, I wish I had that kind of reading back in 2007 when I was starting my journey. It would have been so nice. I mean, everything I read was more like focused on gold and silver with a perspective not complete in some for a certain aspect, because now we have another perspective now with Bitcoin, and which generates another type of discussion. So yeah, Bitcoin Standard, if it's not something if you have already, that's one. I've been suggested the Blockchain War. I have not read it, and I'm going to do that. And the thing is, for me, I went through that war. You know, I was there when things were going on, and it was like I was reading left and right. But I think it's going to be interesting for me to read it and pick up things that the guy grabbed about all that debate that was going on left and right. And that's another book I intend to read. Other than that, the Mike Maloney has a good book about the guide to investing in gold and silver, even though you might not. It's just for giving you an idea of, you know, he's got another perspective. And the Hidden Secrets of Money on YouTube, that those 10 episodes, it's been well animated. It's interesting and it's fun to watch those things. And his take, he's got an episode on Bitcoin where I don't agree. He's not touching about the Lightning Network at all, and he's promoting another cryptocurrency that is
Ashgraph, I think it is.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not like I'm a total fan of that. It's sort of a little bit too, maybe a twist and centralized. And it's always there's just some people disagree with that, decentralization is a spectrum. You know, for them it's 0 or 1. Either you're centralized or you decentralize. But I think the level of decentralization is a shade of gray, and Bitcoin being one of the most decentralized you can think of, in the sense that you still have the miners, where, like we saw with China, that have been a target. Obviously, you have multiple places in the world that you can mine, but there are always, you know, big corporations and big, you know, sometimes big mining rigs and here and there. So there's a little bit more of a somewhat of a danger of, but it's minor. Now, overall, I'd say Bitcoin is the most decentralized, but hash graph is a little bit, yeah. So, and just come back, episode 8 is, yeah, it's his take is not appropriate to me. But other than that, I agree with a lot, and it's really interesting. And he's got it's good to see. I like history, and even more when you're talking about the history and concept of history and money, and that's why I like very much The Creature from Jekyll Island, because it revisits history with the financial aspect or the economic aspect behind that, what barely any movie touches, you know, rarely, you know. And one of the things you'll notice is that sometimes some bankers that were financing both sides of the war, they were actually, they lend money to both sides of the government that were fighting each other. And because they were doing so, they were allowed to have their foot soldiers, I mean, these bankers have some of their staff trafficking goods that were not available on each side. So one thing like tobacco for, I can't, nothing comes to mind for Europe, but imagine tobacco in the South for the US versus something that the North had during the Civil War. So there's something in Europe equivalent. So they were, you know, doing they had those beneficial treatment.
Stephanie, did you have a question as well?
Yeah.
Or was it Fabian?
I don't think I had anything specific. You can go on with what were you going to say, Fabian?
Well, I guess just what one question on collateralized loans and so in real estate. So that's where I'm getting that this frame of question is, right? People can now collateralize their Bitcoin. I think people are starting to realize that very wealthy people don't sell their assets; they just take loans on them. How do you see? Okay, so my not well thought out question is loans and lending out money from Bitcoin, right? Is that going to create new money? Does that create, obviously it doesn't create new Bitcoin, right? But what does that create, if anything? Or is it just what am I trying to say here? Like
Hidden Secret of Money from Mike Maloney, episode 4 covers the whole, because you live in the US, right?
correct. I live in Vietnam, actually. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I live in Vietnam. I feel like I'm in the US.
I was like,
now,
no, he doesn't.
yeah.
So, but you're
Vietnam.
American.
I'm crazy.
So you're American, right?
I'm American, yeah.
All right. So you'll understand how well, which is generally the same across every central banks and operating today in the world. But it goes through how, basically in a very crude way, how things work. And yes, I mean, because of fractional reserve banking, money is created. Well, actually, when you go in a restaurant and swap your credit cards, $100 will be created and it will be destroyed. Like the matter, antimatter, when you at the end of the month, you pay it back. then the dollars and the debt will vanish together. And that's why it's not a debt ceiling. It's more like a debt target, because they'll never pay up the loan, and they'll always reach that debt ceiling, and then they'll have to put a new one. This system is designed this way, and it's broken, and it's designed this way, and it's actually accelerating, because if they don't, it'll be a complete collapse of the entire system, because there's more debt than there are dollars in existence to pay it, because the debt increased because the interest on the debt. It's completely crazy. It's a proof of debt. That's what I call it. The US dollar is more like a proof of debt, while Bitcoin's proof of work is a proof of debt system.
I'm going to start using that. Proof of debt. Awesome. All right, guys. Does anyone have any other questions? No? I think we'll wrap it up. Jack, did you want to say something?
Just one more. I don't know, should I even ask it, but we were saying it before, but do you have any theories on Satoshi, on who you think he is?
No, no, I don't. I'm suspecting it must be, well, likely is
Adam back? No, I'm joking.
No, I'm suspecting I'm generalizing. It's someone who's being probably involved with the cyberpunk folks, or at least if he was not even involved, that means he got interested in all that, started reading, got knowledge with all that, and yeah, it's a mystery. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and it's probably best no one does know either anyway. So
there were so many. And what's funny is that it calmed down today, but it was so active in 2013, 2014, all the way to 2016. It started to die off in 2016. Mostly 2014 was the peak, where including that Newsmax article about, I found Satoshi Nakamoto. His name is Satoshi Dorian Nakamoto and lives in Los Angeles. I found him, and that's his name. Wow. Poor guy. And I definitely not the guy. We know that for sure today. But I remember I was reading, and so I had to modify the writing of my book, because that was happening at that time.
Wow. Yeah.
And suddenly, whoops, there's that new post from Satoshi. Oh my God, what do I do? But then some people were saying, is it really him? It's like 4 years of already people are skeptical from the same account. And so it tells you now it's really going to be a hard time for someone to prove that they're, the only thing is they're going to have to prove it is through private keys. There's no other way, But it was a lot of people try to do English analysis of who might he be by going through a bunch of the type of writings that he's done.
We did our own English analysis.
Sometimes it's English, sometimes it's American English, sometimes so it's not always uniform. So maybe on purpose. Time zones has been analyzed as well. And it's all over the board. It's not always clear cut. So
it was really good.
Yeah.
Or they were.
Oh yeah.
Sorry?
Group maybe.
It
could have been a group.
Were. Many.
Yes,
But
they could that too.
Well, how about that? Do you lean one way or another on a plural or one person?
No, I'm pretty agnostic on that.
Okay.
No speculation.
Yeah, there's no point for me. It's going to be, and anything is possible. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, we should invite you on when we do the creature from Jekyll Island.
Oh yes, I'll be intrigued. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Phil, and everyone. I think we all speak for everyone. We all had a great time. So
great.
Yeah.
Where can people follow you? Do people follow you on Twitter, Phil? If do you have any accounts for people to go follow you that's listening?
Yeah. Sorry. It's egg underscore descrambler. EGG underscore descrambler. Now, if you're wondering where that's coming from, it's I was in my electrical engineering class. There was a printout from a magazine about how to create a descrambler for how channels that were scrambled on the pay channels on the cable. You know, they had a device that did the analog doing scramble of the video. So you could create the descrambler, then you'll be able to watch for free those things by looking them up. And so I just bought printed the printout of this, and it was like it was just written descrambler. Just for the fun of it, I put egg descrambler, and some guy saw that and he found it funny and he pointed that at me. And so that's when I needed an handles, I just had a memory of that again. So it's all right, here's my handle. It'll be fun.
Okay, right. So thanks for coming on, Phil.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Fabian. Thanks, Max. Thanks,
Yeah,
Stephanie.
thanks so much for filming.